It's been rough. A lot of people going through anxiety, whether it's because of the pandemic or because of Trump and what's going on, the riots in Washington, the transition. You know, whenever I'm watching the news and I see Frank Figluzzi come on TV, I kind of get a sense of calmness and security, I guess, because I know what I'm watching is somebody with integrity. I believe him. He was the national security. He is the national security analyst for NBC News. Watch him all the time on MSNBC. He was the FBI's chief inspector and served as a special agent for 25 years, rising to become assistant director, charged with leading the Bureau's Counterintelligence division. Ran the whole thing. His new book, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. It is great to have you on the show.
I'm glad we could do this today in a week that has been incredibly anxiety-driven for most Americans.
It is. I have so many questions for you. Feel free to elaborate on any of these things, but the book is terrific. But let's talk about some of the things that are going on right now. For example, if we should find out that a member of Congress gave tours to these people who became the rioters, is there anything the FBI can do while they're still in office?
Yeah, it's called handcuffs. And every FBI agent has a pair of them. And if that is in fact established through evidence, then they are going to be charged with conspiracy to commit sedition and inciting insurrection. They will be criminal conspirators. And if the evidence is pointing in that direction and there's a grand jury indictment for that, these people will be dragged out of their Capitol offices in handcuffs.
Awesome. That's the way I feel no matter what side of the aisle you're on. I wanted to throw out something. I've been a broadcaster doing talk shows on one form of media or the other. And something I've noticed back in the late 80s when Rush Limbaugh came on the air and eventually Fox News came on the air, I noticed they started mixing half-truths and misinformation into stories that are true. And it was always to support Republicans and demonize Democrats. But there was a change that I noticed by, let's say, 2009 during the Tea Party days. It seems like the Republican politicians started to take their marching orders from right-wing media personalities, whether it's Rush or Sean Hannity. And then the half-truths and misinformation started to become lies, outright disinformation, conspiracy theories when Trump came along. And my question is, how can we stop these big lies? Because that's what's affecting and dementing these politicians. I knew we had a fairness doctrine that Reagan did away with years ago that might have helped, but these are cable channels. What can be done? What can be done, Frank?
We're all asking that hard question right now, Allan, and I think let me try to respond here. First,
please.
You're right that falsehoods, fabrications, mistruths, and lies have been a large part of how we got to where we are right now. We've got to seek truth from multiple sources more than ever before. The truth is out there. The truth is ascertainable. It's not subjective. There's objective truth out there. I spent 25 years in the FBI seeking evidence and truth to prosecute people. You can do it just as you do it at a crime scene. It's either there or it's not there. Secondly, this has been fueled by social media and the polarized extreme echo chambers that we all live in. We get our news from one source only. We don't check out the other side of the story anymore. And all of this has led many, many Americans to point their allegiance and loyalty to a person and trust a person instead of the system and process and values of democracy. That's a recipe for radicalization. What I've seen happen over the last 4 years has been a kind of radicalization process that looks eerily similar to what we see in violent Islamic jihadist movements. Young people sitting in front of their computers watching horrible beheading videos thinking everyone else is evil and infidels that must be killed. That's a radicalization process. That's what we're going through right now, and it may not go away when this president goes away. So how do you de-radicalize a segment of the population? First of all, you've got to get them the truth and expose them to sunshine and light. Secondly, you have to offer them the benefits of thinking like someone else thinks. What do I mean by that? People who are avid MAGA Trumpsters may find it interesting that another person is going to offer their family health care that they drastically need.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some other system is going to say, do you need reduced or free college for your kids that another president has already said no to? These are the kinds of things where people will need to say, wait a minute, maybe I'm not hearing the whole story from one side. But I get worried about our ability to do that when we're still stuck in our echo chambers. And then when we have media platforms that appeal only to one side, like Parler, and we take them down, it's a two-edged sword. People feel like they're being censored, they have no voice, and it may chase them into the darkest recesses of the dark web where law enforcement can't see them and where they only hear each other and their extremist, violent ranting. So we've got to figure this out quickly, and while we're trying to figure it out, we still don't have a domestic terrorism law on the books.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. The thing is, ever since Rush Limbaugh started, it's been a demonization of what he, quote unquote, mainstream media. And he demonized it to the point that everybody laughed at it. It's mocked it. Don't watch it. Don't watch MSNBC or CNN, the communist news network, whatever these little cliche things that he did. Well, ultimately, they don't. They don't. If they hear something on MSNBC, some of these people just automatically are skeptical. So with that in mind, and with the First Amendment in mind, you can't censor, even though, you know, when it's a private company, Cox Media, whoever puts these people on cable, I think they can certainly censor, or at least some kind of a council made up of Republicans and Democrats that can say, you know, what you're listening to may be in doubt. Misinformation has been said a lot on this show, or some kind of a panel. We got to do something because they're just going to go crazy. And I don't know how it's to deprogram these people. I have friends like that. They'll never watch MSNBC except to mock it because they just don't believe it.
Because we've demonized
That's
each
right.
other, and we see each other as evil, and that is a horrible, horrible thing. And here's the other thing, is the mixture of religion and politics is extremely dangerous, and even the replacement of religion with political ideology is how we get violent jihadists. The notion that only one kind of Christian thought has the sole rights to the truth, and that you can only be a Christian if you adhere to a certain party or person,
Right.
is just utter nonsense. But more importantly, it's how people get violent, because that's the most passionate thing they can be, is religion.
Right. And we don't teach people in school how to critically think. You know, I had an English teacher, or I think it was English or social studies, I don't know, it was in 10th grade, and he yelled at us for merely just writing down notes and not questioning. And, you know, critical thinking, that we need that in education.
What a great thought, because I'm having similar thoughts right now as I keep seeing videos of people breaching the security and torturing police officers, quite frankly, inside the building. There's no way that education taught these people what democracy is about. There's no way that we successfully ingrained democratic core principles into these people and taught them what the government is and what it is not. And so we've got to get better at that in the education system. We also have to teach kids how to be intelligent, far more intelligent consumers of information. Like you said,
Right.
When you sit down with your child and, God forbid, watch the evening news or read a news story, teach them to question every single line in it. Does that make sense to you? How do you think they found that evidence? What would you do having learned this?
Exactly.
Intelligent consumers of information, get your news from several sources, get your news from serious journalists, because we're going the wrong direction right now.
First of all, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Frank Figlliuzzi, the author of the new book, The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. The difficulty in fighting domestic terrorism, it's because for a long time, it seemed to me, from you tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Republicans resisted having a classification of domestic terror. So your hands are tied. FBI hands are tied. You can't do certain things unless it's called terrorism. Is that the way it was? Is that the reason we can't do more and we weren't more prepared?
Yeah, look, there's lots of reasons why this happened at the Capitol and wasn't stopped. I've been saying that it's not so much an intelligence failure, but a security failure. It's a failure to act on available intelligence. We know now that the FBI, NYPD, all shared detailed security concerns with the Capitol Police. So we've got a lot of questions that need answering about how high up this went at the Capitol, whether actual members of Congress, as is now being reported, gave tours in the days before the insurrection to leaders of the riot, and they'll be held responsible. But yes, we need a domestic terrorism law in the United States, and here's the deal: there are still serious civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy concerns with having a domestic terrorism law. We do not want anybody policing ideology and thought. We want this linked to violent plans and intentions, but we still have no way of designating a group or organization domestically as a terrorist organization, even when we know that those groups are all about violence. So we have that on the international terrorism side. We've designated Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, etc., as terrorist groups. And why is that important? For two reasons. First, once that designation occurs, if you become engaged with those groups, you will be investigated, and you'll have undercover agents and wiretaps from courts and informant development and monitoring of communications and social media, all aimed at preventing the next act of terrorism. We've gotten very good at that in this country. We haven't had a major act of terrorism on our soil since 9/11.
Right.
That's because of those proactive tools. But then, if you actually succeed, you'll get put away for the rest of your life because you are violating terrorism laws. We don't have a way of doing that on the domestic side. We need those tools. We need those penalties. We need to figure it out.
We do. And what your book does so well, The FBI Way, is to talk about the integrity of the FBI. And let me ask you this question. How do we now, after Trump, kind of get the respect back and kind of like a roadmap to restore the integrity? What's your recipe for this? Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, I hate when that happens. Anyway, the good news is Frank got back to me.
Yeah, sure. In the FBI, we call this a follow-up question.
Go over that roadmap, if you could, just a little bit, just to give us a way to end this with some hope.
I always try to end with hope because that's all we've got at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So, look, yeah, in my book, the last chapter is called Consistency, and it's about how to get through a time of unprecedented crisis. And I talk about how, on a daily basis, the FBI is faced with unprecedented threats, from anthrax to terrorism, from kidnappings to bombings. And the way they get through it is not to abandon the values that got us here, not to abandon the protocols, the battle rhythm, the training that they have. And if we do that as a nation, if we stick with our core values as a democratic republic, the three equal branches of government, the rule of law, and the Constitution, and we see ourselves all as stewards and conservators of our democracy, this fragile experiment called democracy can survive. We've been through a civil war, presidential assassinations, presidential impeachment, Vietnam War protests, civil rights protests. we can get through this, but we've got to come together with collective core values. Don't look at a person, look at the concept of democracy, and we'll get through it.
You're right. And boy, you're doing great work. You are really taking care of things because, integrity is everything, and you just have it all over you. I appreciate what you're doing for society. And your book, The FBI Way, congratulations. It's excellent. And thanks for being on the Allan Handelman Show.
It's been my pleasure. Stay safe and be that conservator for America's democracy.